Today we look at Luke 14:25 to 30. This section is often called the cost of discipleship, as Jesus highlights through metaphors what it takes to walk on the way, to follow Him, to become like Him, to enter that path into the heart of God, to live the awakened spiritual life. We begin with the reading. Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife and children, his brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. And anyone who does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Will he not first sit down and estimate the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? For if he lays the foundation and is not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule him, saying, 'This fellow began to build and was not able to finish.'" We are dealing here with metaphors that seek to give us a sense of a different way of being. And through this subtlety of expression, it is so easy to misunderstand. It cannot be taken literally, because the metaphors are not about themselves. They're about what they're trying to point to. So when Jesus says you must hate a father, mother, brother, sister, he's not actually saying that. He is taking that which is most treasured in human life, hopefully, certainly in Hebrew society of that day, where the sacredness of caring for family, loving family, was all-consuming, both spiritually, primarily, almost tribe-like, if you will, but it was absolutely fundamental. So Jesus is taking that which is most treasured and shocking the listener, shocking us with this radical statement. And it is the shock that he is trying to give us, not the content of that metaphor. Jesus comes to reveal love, a love for all, a love for the worst of sinners. So surely he is not telling us not to love. That would seem obvious. Unfortunately, it isn't. But what he is doing is, in that shock, sending us upward into another state of consciousness, if you will, where we are forced to see things differently. That is, we have to let go of that which is impossible to let go of, if you will, in order to find a greater context in which to live that. In other words, to live the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one, and you shall worship him with all your heart, mind, soul. The implication of such a commandment, which means, therefore, that in our single-minded devotion to God, to the source of life, to the holy, by doing that, then we can truly love the others. But if we only love the others because they're family, tribe, cultural habits, then we are limiting our love of them. So that translation into the verb hate is an obstacle that can send us in the wrong direction. We find that word used in the Old Testament when a king hated one of his wives and then ended up having more children with her. So it is not a term that expresses what we understand by hate. One might say, puts in the right place, prioritizes one's love. We must understand that ancient languages had fewer words and therefore multiple meanings condensed in those words, which cannot translate well into modern English. But more importantly, as I said, to know that the Christ is incarnation of love should give us a clue that we cannot read this from the surface. We cannot truly love another if we have not cleansed the inside of the cup, committed ourselves to the reality of God in such a way that it is our single purpose in life. That with every breath there is remembrance of whose we are, why we exist, what we are to accomplish here. In that state of mind, state of consciousness, we can then approach the rest of the world. As he says in other places, it is easy to love the person you know, but it is next to impossible to hate the enemy. As he says in another place, it is easy to love one who loves you back or one who is family. It is not easy to love the enemy. So nothing is gained by that, shall we say, easy love, natural love. He wants agape, conscious love. He calls us to this, where willpower, discipline, commitment, sacrifice is made to accomplish it. I heard recently a description of love not as a feeling, but as a discipline. To choose to put one's real intention into that work, into that effort. In the second metaphor, he talks about one who will build a tower and needs to estimate the cost, or it will be incomplete. How does that translate to the spiritual seeker? How does one estimate the cost? I suggest to you that it is more a recognition of what it will take. That is to say, what we must work on. That is what we are being told to focus on. What must we do in order to awaken, to become, to be authentic? And it is the discovery of these matters, of engaging with our illusory personality, with the domination of the ego, with all of our hidden aggressions or repressed feelings. This is estimating the cost, facing that which must be done in order to accomplish it. Otherwise, we can claim to be spiritual and never work on ourselves. Read the right books, do the right workshops and celebrations, or whatever the community is up to that claims to be religious, even wear the right clothes, have the right smile, but if it is not that brutally honest encounter with ourselves, then we are at best only partly finished by the end, because we have not really taken into consideration what it takes to work on ourselves, to bring forth the new man, as is said biblically, to let go, to be released from the old. We have to know what specifically within us must be worked on. On one level, it can be as simple as impatience or vanity or a need to dominate others, all those requirements. We must come to know ourselves in order to know what we must work on in order to change. This is estimating the cost, or nothing will happen. As Maurice Nicole says, how can you change if you remain the same? And this is parallel to what Jesus is saying here in his seemingly simplistic metaphor. And this truth is overlooked to this day, because for many, as we know, simply showing up in a church service or having agreed to a certain set of beliefs and creeds and propositions, that is their religion. Facing themselves, changing, going against the current of their familiar patterns, this is the real work. This is taking up your cross. This is the suffering, if you will, the necessary suffering of confronting that which in us, which has dominated our lives out of self-interest, perhaps survival or reactions from the wounds of life, the defense mechanisms, the armor. But all of that must be dealt with in order to find that inner freedom, that lightness of being that makes us true to our real selves, to our essential selves, and therefore transparent to the divine within. A few verses later he tells us, in the same way any of you who does not give up everything. A few verses later he tells us, in the same way any of you who does not give up everything he has cannot be my disciple. And sure enough, people literally to this day give up everything they have, thinking that that is following this teaching. An example I know of is a decent couple seeking to be good Christians who sell their house to live in that poverty, to detach themselves from material things. And what is the result? They have no place to live. They have to move in with their children. How is that spiritual work? Is that not obviously absurd? To give up everything we have is to detach ourselves from our obsession for the false security of material things. It does not mean become a vagabond, be irresponsible, damage your life and that of others. This is not the way of Christ, who tells us, enter into my joy, that your joy may be complete, who speaks of the glorious children. We must realize that these are cosmic spiritual teachings that must be taken in to a deeper place in ourselves, that can grasp ideas that are not spoken but embedded in what is said, that only our intuition, our deeper knowing, our emotional understanding can grasp. And then to give up everything we have means to be free internally from the hypnotism of fears for survival, of what the culture thinks we need, in order to, while being in this world, with the things that are around us, we are yet not of this world and are witnesses to eternity.